So it's great to be here today. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Catherine. And it's great to see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd. Family, friends, former public servants, all people who have contributed greatly to the success of the city of Rye. And John Carey was always somebody who brought people together. So isn't it great that one more time John has brought us all together here today? It is a pretty rare thing to have a street naming in Rye these days. Most of the streets were named many, many years ago, and there aren't a lot of new streets that are being developed. There's a lot of development going on in Rye. But the renaming option, George and Catherine, that was brilliant. So great job there. Although, unfortunately, you may be giving some other former mayors in the crowd the wrong idea about what is in store down the road. So there's a local historian, Paul Reingold, and he actually wrote a book recently that was published by the Rye Historical Society. And that wasn't Paul, I don't think. He wrote a book about how all the streets in Rye got their name. And although Paul told me that after this day, he might have to come out with a second edition. So even though I'm giving them a plug, you might want to wait until that second edition hits the shelves. But look, because street naming opportunities in Rye are indeed so few and far between, you really got to get it right. And George and Catherine, I think you nailed it, because John Carey is an iconic figure in the history of the city of Rye. Now, there is a small bit of irony here, because when John was mayor, he did at times go toe-to-toe with the county over issues involving Rye Playland, as Rye mayors have been known to do over the years. Nonetheless, I do think it's a tremendous gesture that Catherine, you and George have made this work together with your colleagues on the county board. So, I didn't meet John until he was later on in years, right? But even then, he was one of the youngest people that I knew because of his joyful approach to life. And I did, though, at one point see a photo of John when he was truly in his prime. And I know that Jennifer has a nice black and white from the bench when Judge Carey was presiding over the Warmest trial. But the one that I saw, Doug, I think you showed it to me. It was a black and white also of John on the campaign trail, on Purchase Street, head cocked, glint in his eye, hand on his hip. He really cut a truly formidable figure. And in my mind's eye, that's how, even though I didn't know him then, that's how I pictured John, because that's how he acted, even as time went on. And I've thought to myself, if I were a contemporary of John's and I had to run an election against him, he would have made mincemeat out of me. I'm telling you right now. And no doubt any other modern day politician. But I was lucky enough to befriend John, regardless of our difference in age. And Catherine said we had a friendship. He actually even endorsed me when I ran for mayor as a Republican. But I would note that my opponent that year was running as an independent. So if a Democrat was actually on the ballot, I'm not sure I would have actually fared so well with John, friendship or not. And I saw Beth Griffin Matthews. She's walking the dog back there. Beth told me before I came up that the first time she ever voted as a college student by absentee ballot, it was for John Carey as a Democrat. So John was a trailblazer. These were the days when Democrats were not shoo-ins like they are now, Catherine. So John, I was telling Jennifer that John was a lot tougher than me, because John, early on, his victories are renowned, right? He went on to fame and fortune, and he was elected mayor and county court judge. But in the early days, he lost more than he won, but he picked himself up, dusted himself up, and kept on going, because he was tough. He was tough, and he was passionate. You know, John would have loved this day. Like he would have loved this event because you know John was a master at staging media events, quite frankly. And you know, you can search the record. You know, someone said check Google, but you know, you can find stories about John and Doug and Jennifer and Chip. You can fill in the details at the luncheon later. But you know, he one time brought the cameras to the Metro North platform and stuck a mannequin leg. Morio Sachs, were you the mastermind behind that? See, every great politician has a mastermind, and Morio, I didn't know that part of the story, but you know, John was trying to demonstrate how safety was a concern on the MTA platform. And I think the train went away with the mannequin leg in the door. Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad that didn't happen. But another famous one, and Morio, maybe this was you too, but there are pictures in the old newspapers of John surfing on a skateboard down Library Lane. Because I think the issue was, you know, skateboards were just invented, right? And folks in the community didn't want them, and John was trying to prove that they were okay. Was that? So Morio is telling us that John was maybe doing battle with the police chief who didn't want them on the streets, and John was trying to show that it was okay. John was a kid at heart, obviously, and obviously pretty good skill on the skateboard. But so John was ahead of his time in many ways. But I digress a little bit too much, and Catherine, I don't want to outstay my welcome. But you know, I would also just say that even though John was a renowned public servant, he was above all a family man. He was a devoted husband, father, grandfather, and it's great to see the grandchildren here. I met Nathaniel and Caleb. I haven't seen them in a little while. They're much bigger now. And I think Shenoa, I thought I saw you pull up. Okay. And John Henry. Pleasure to see you all here. Your grandfather was a great man, and this is, you know, a fitting testament. And I was also saying beforehand, you know, by rights, you know, this street, and I know it hasn't been unveiled yet, but it could be called John and Pat Carey Place, because they were a team, they were a couple, and maybe it's not too late to get some white paint and put it in there before the veil comes off. But as a man of the people, this street sign certainly bestows a degree of well-deserved immortality to one of Rye's all-time greats. By the way, Catherine, I did check my iPhone this morning, and Google Maps still does not have this on the grid. Okay, so maybe the press office for the county can make a few phone calls to make sure that happens after this morning.
John?
Also, one final bit of trivia. Does anyone remember the last time a new road was named in Rye? Actually, that may have been the one before this one, but the old Rye Hospital site on the Post Road by Nugent Field was, you know, torn down, and there was a little development of 3 McMansions that were put in there, and they named it Edith Reed Court. And that's when I actually got interested in the naming of new streets. And minor footnote to history, Mayor John Carey actually appointed Edith Reed to the Rye City Council to fill a vacancy, probably his own vacancy when he was elected mayor, right? Which I've had some experience doing that myself. One last thing, and Ralph, you got a shout out before, but I'll give you another shout out. You know, Morio, Ralph, you know, it's great to see John's old friends here, you know, carrying the flame for such a great friend that they had. And I know, Ralph, you were instrumental behind the scenes in trying to make this happen. So, Catherine, that's all I got. God bless John Carey. Have a great day.